I'm going to continue with the next part. So now everything is ready. So what do we have? Let's take a quick look, a quick recap. We have a vertex shader, we have a fragment shader with a defined color, red. We're not changing that for now. Then we have a triangle and its locations. Then we have the shaders initialized. Then we have a buffer and a bunch of functions to prepare the buffer. Finally, we connected the triangle with the buffer. Now the only thing left is to draw the triangle, because passing the buffer to the shader and the shader will do the rest. Let me quickly check the chat. Right, so there is a question, do you have to do all this every time we draw a shape or just once? So you can do all this just once, and then that's the purpose of this step, right? So this is telling you to have separate function for setup WebGL, right? Then connect variables to GLSL, and then we didn't do all these things. We are going to render all shapes. So sort of this is the first part. So you can have a function for this part, you can have a function up to this part that is called setup WebGL, right? Everything you can put inside this function, then connect variable to GLSL. This is what we did here. So this is a variable. We are doing this connection to GLSL here. So you can have another function, right? So just calling the function would be enough for drawing each of the shapes. Then final part is going to be, we're not handling clicks, we're just rendering the shapes. For now, I only have one shape, so my rendering or drawing will be very simple. That's what I'm going to do in one line now. But before that, I want to make sure I answered your question.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
All right, no problem. Okay, so last part. So this is simple triangle. For your case, this will maybe a for loop or something like a list of objects or something like that. For my case, I just want to draw the array I have here. So this triangle, I want to draw it. So there is a function called draw array, draw arrays. Right? So you'll see another version of this function for drawing objects that is called draw element. That is a bit more sophisticated, because for draw arrays, it assumes that everything is packed together in this array. It will just draw each three component, since we defined 3 here. But the draw element will be a bit more sophisticated, and you will have more control what exactly you want to draw from this data. So for now, we're going to go with the simple one. So we're going to use GL triangle. So this triangle is a graphic primitive, right? You already, I think you know that from your class lecture. So we have triangles, we have quads, we have lines, we have points, polygons. So there are some basic primitives. So triangles are one of the primitives that is used for drawing most of the objects, because we usually use triangular mesh for 3D object. We'll learn more about that later. So we are going to draw triangles, and then 0. We are starting from 0. So this is the index where we're going to start. So we can have multiple triangles in the same array. And we can start maybe from the index 4. So first 3 can be one triangle, next to it can be another triangle. So we're going to start from 0. Then how long we are going to continue? We are going to continue until the length of this triangle divided by 3, since we are using 3 points at a time, right? So 3 is defined here, so it will jump by 3. But how long it will continue? It will continue up to the length of this triangle. And then divided by 3, right? For our case, it will be 3. We have 9 components, 3 coordinates for each of the components, x, y, z, and we have 3. So if everything is good, Then if we run the code, it will draw the triangle. If not, then we'll have to do some debugging. So let's try that. So, okay, did I save it? I think I did. The fragment color is fine. And okay, just make sure that we are using the right one. Okay, so we have our object, we have our array, but nothing is showing up. Okay, so let me double check and see what did I miss. Okay, so we have our GL position here, we have our A position, we have our fragment shader here, and the frag color. Everything looks good. We have our console log GL, we have our triangle, we have our init shader, we have our vertex buffer, we have our bind buffer, then we have the A position, then we added that here, and then we have this draw arrays. Okay, there is only one thing missing I can see here, but I'm not sure if that is the reason. But I'll go ahead and fix that. So the thing is, we defined that we are going to use medium precision floating point array, but here we defined our triangle. It's just a simple array, right? So in JavaScript, there is no explicit definition of variables. We never defined that this is going to be a float, but we are saying that we are using float. So that's why the data we are sending is not actually valid. And we need to use this data as a float. That's why we are going to redefine this as a floating point array, which will be more compatible with our OpenGL or WebGL. So I'm going to use float32 array, and then okay, so this should be more in line with what we want to do. Then let me double check. Everything else is fine. We have this init shader, vertex shader, and the fragment shader. We are saying the GL. Then we have GL create buffer, vertex buffer, bind buffer. We are using A position. We have this attrib pointer. We have this attrib array enabled, and then the buffer data, and then finally draw arrays and triangle length. Okay, so let's try this again and see what happens. Okay, so this is working, right? So we wanted to draw a red triangle, and using this draw call, now we see a red triangle here. And how did we define the color? We didn't do any processing for the color, right? We just defined red here. So if I change this to maybe a different color, green, or maybe a combined color, let's have some green and some blue, maybe, or some red. So this gives us a different color triangle.